In this lesson, we present a case study to build on concepts discussed in previous lessons. Examples are shown of a few of the many different order types accessible from the API, namely the relative or peg to primary order type and hedging pair trades. Some major takeaway points are, first, that many different order types can be used from the TWS API, for instance, the peg to primary or relative order, which is very useful. In this order type, an order is placed to the exchange at a limit price, which is automatically modified by the IB server as the market moves up or down. Second, that orders can be submitted to the IB server such that they are attached to one another. That is to say that only one order is placed to the exchange and that the other orders or order are held back until the first order executes. In the case of pair trades, the two orders are for different instruments, whereas for bracket orders, they would be two different orders for the same instrument. Just keep in mind there are many different creative ways to place and combine orders from the Trader Workstation API. Pair trading is a popular strategy in algorithmic trading where an instrument is bought and the related instrument is sold short. For a general discussion of pair trading, there are many resources available on the internet. Often pair trading stocks is a mean reversion strategy, where the expectation is that the relative price difference in two related stocks will return to a historical mean. A possible advantage, in theory, of pair trading is that it should be a market-neutral strategy if both instruments have the same correlation or beta to the general market. Additionally, different instrument pair trades might be expected to be uncorrelated with one another. In this lesson, we won't discuss techniques by which instruments and pair trades might be selected, which is a topic outside the scope of the API, but we will focus on how to create and place an API hedging pair trade. All order types and combinations of orders available to the API can also be created manually in TWS. In this example, after sufficient analysis, a trader decides to place a pair trade for Domino's Pizza and Papa John's stock. The trader places a large number of orders, and so he prefers to automate order placement via the API. These are the steps the trader follows to place a Domino's Pizza, Papa John's stock pair trade. First, an API contract object must be defined for Domino's Pizza stock, which has ticker symbol DPZ. This is done by creating a smart routed contract object with DPZ as a symbol. There are many example contract definitions for stocks and other instruments in the API reference guide. Next, an order type is chosen for the DPZ order. The trader here decides to use relative orders because he thinks he may obtain a better price because of the bid-ask spread than he would with a plain limit order placed at the bid or at the ask price. Next, the first order for DPZ stock is placed, but with the transmit flag in the API order class set to false, so that the order is not sent to the IB server before the second order is attached to it. Then, the trader creates a contract object for Papa John stock, symbol PZZA. Finally, a hedging order is placed for the PZZA stock by setting a value for the hedging type to the letter P, which stands for pair trade, a ratio of 5, which is the ratio of the size of the second order to the size of the first, and the parent order ID, which was used in the step 3 in order to link the two orders together. In general, when placing orders from the API, there are two different types of settings which might prevent a valid order from being placed. So in Trader Workstation, to get to the Global Configuration menu from the Classic view, you'd go under Edit and choose Global Configuration. And then there's a section for API, which we'll expand to find the settings. The first setting is read-only API, which is checked by default. I've already unchecked it here, and that will block any order from an API program. So to place an order, this has to be unchecked. The second group of settings is under Precautions, where there is a global override for precautionary measures called Bypass Order Precautions for API orders. If this setting is checked, it will bypass all the order precautions which are set by default on an instrument type basis. You can find more information about what those precautions are if you go under the Preset section. You select an instrument type such as stocks and then scroll to the bottom. Then you can see the precautionary settings which are enabled by default for stocks. And so each different type of instrument will have its own groups of settings. Those apply to things like the price percentage, the total value limit of the order, the size limit of the order, or the modification limit. So you have the option of either modifying those individually or using the global bypass under the API section. Okay, now that those settings have been changed, we can place orders and show an example of an API pair trade. Most of the parts of this example will look familiar if you've watched the previous lessons. Here, the order status callbacks, which we have overridden, are the same as in the previous lesson, which discussed order placement, namely next file ID, order status, open order, and exec details. These callback functions are only overridden here to print return data to the console in our example. We also have created a couple helper functions. One's called US stock, which helps us to define US stock instruments quickly. It provides default fields of security type as STK, the exchange is smart, the currency is USD, and the primary exchange is NYSE. so that only a symbol needs to be provided to return a uniquely defined U.S. stock contract object, since we are placing orders for U.S. stocks which are listed on NYSE. This helps to resolve an ambiguity if there is a contract in a different region with the same ticker and currency, which can also be smart routed. We've also defined a helper function for creating relative orders, which is actually the same one taken from the ordersamples.py file, which is provided with the API. This helps to make the code more readable. In this function, we pass in the action, which can be buy or sell for most account types, the order type, which is REL for relative order in this example, the total quantity, which is the total size of the order, the price cap or limit price of the order, which defines the furthest price order will be set at by the IB server as the market moves, and an offset value, which is the offset between the market price and where the limit price of the order will be set. For instance, if it is a buy relative order with an offset of 0.05 and the current market bid price is 10, the system will place initial buy order at a limit price of 10.05. If the market moves up in this direction, the limit would be modified by the system so that it remains an offset of 0.05 above the current bid. But if the market moves in the opposite direction, it will not be changed. It's important to note also that relative orders with an offset of 0 can exhibit different behavior moving in both directions. The main body of code specific to this program begins in the start function here. Here we first create a DPZ stock contract object using the US stock helper function, and then create a relative order using the relative peg to primary helper function. We set the transmit flag to false, so that this order will not be forwarded to the IB server by TWS before the second order is received. The API order ID used is the next valid ID received automatically after the initial connection is established. So that is where after the initial connection, the next valid order ID was received. Okay, we can then invoke place order to send this order to TWS. So since the transmit flag was set to false, this order won't actually be sent to the IB server. It will be residing in TWS until we send an attached order which has a transmit flag set to true, which we'll do next. In pair hedging trades at the moment, there has to be a small sleep time between the two orders. Here it's set to 200 milliseconds. There are changes in place which are planned so that won't be necessary in the future, but at the current time, you can just set that to a small time interval of 200 milliseconds or less. Next, we create a second order in the pair trade for PZZA using similar steps. So again, we create the US stock contract object using ticker symbol PZZA for the stock which is listed on NYSE. Then we create a relative order using our helper function. In this case, the action will be sell. Note here that the total quantity is 0. Because of the ratio field, that quantity will be calculated automatically by TWS, so it's not set. Then we use the parent ID field, which is just the order ID we used up above to place the original order. And this serves to link the two orders together. Then we have a hedge type field, which is P in this example, since it's a pair trade. There are other types of hedging orders available, for instance, a Forex hedging trade, which would have a different letter. And then finally, the hedging ratio, which is the ratio of the number of shares of PZZA to DPZ. Since the stock prices are approximately 5 to 1, I've chosen 5 in this example. Finally, we invoke place order for the second order. The transmit flag is set to true by default in the API order class constructor. So this order is already configured to be transmitted to the IB server by TWS. When it is sent, all linked orders, which will be our initial order, will be sent as well. So now we can just run this program to see the results. Okay, so this is the order status callbacks we receive. We receive an open order for each order, and an order status message for each order. You can see here the open order for the initial stock, which was DPZ, has a status of submitted because it's actually been submitted to the exchange. The other order for PZZA has a status of pre-submitted because it's attached and being held back until the first order executes. We can also see that in TWS. If we look at our orders here in the pending order status tab, the initial order for DPZ has the order status of green because it's been submitted to the exchange. The attached hedging order for PZZA has a status of pre-submitted, which is indicated here by a maroon color because it's being held on the IB server until DPZ executes. We can also open up an order ticket to see more information about the orders. So here we can see the different information we added, such as the order type, the limit price, the offset. The offset in this example was 0.